Good morning. Let your culture of safety line team. I hope everybody's doing well today. It is October here in South Carolina 2025, and if you could bottle up a day and keep a day every single year or every single day of the year, this is the day you want to do it. It's beautiful out today. And just wanted real quick let everybody know that the Let Your Culture of Safety, go to letyourcultureofsafety.com, get on there and click on the resources. Resources, that's what you want to use, all the resources, no cost. There are some training videos that are not public. All you have to do to get any of those is contact me at brent@bierermeters.com and ask for which episodes you would like. After this week, we will have 81. So every single one of the Linemen Safety National Webinars from 001 up until today, when Miss Gretchen's training today, they're all different. It's amazing how this has worked out. So we started almost 4 years ago, be February of 2026, it'll be 4 years. And we got up to about 15,000 plus partners that are registered, and we just don't even worry about that anymore. We're not going to do that anymore. Just contact me if you want. Go to go in the resources. Go to the promo videos of all the episodes. They're all there. And go to the topic and the speaker you want to listen to. Listen to. They're about 2 minutes long. And if you want that full length, contact me, and we'll send it to you. There's no cost to be a part of ECOS, Let Your Culture of Safety. I just want to let you all know that Miss Gretchen, I met her at the T&D Trainers Conference last February, and she was a keynote speaker, and I listened to her, and I really enjoyed her intelligence mixed with caring for people. It's a really amazing thing, and her keynote speech was awesome. And afterwards, I talked with her, spoke with her, and Miss Jen Miller, who has been here personally herself, doing two episodes of Linemen Safety National Webinars, and you got to get those. But I asked Miss Gretchen if she could come back in February, if she could come here in October, and basically she said yes, like hardly even thought about it. So it's a real neat thing what we're doing here, and as you can see, we got grass here, so that proves this is a grassroots safety coalition. We're fostering line team nationwide. None of you all pay for this. Miss Gretchen's company paid for her to get here. Miss Jen's visiting, partnering up with her on the trip, and they paid for it. And Beer Meters, we pay for a videographer. You all get these every 2 a month for no cost. So be part of it. It's an amazing thing we're doing here together as a line team. But I want to show you real quick. We have OneSpan. Miss Gretchen's the CEO of OneSpan here, Powerline Services, and they partnered up a couple years ago with the ECOS partnership logo. And then also another company that she's CEO and has is the DaVinciSKY group. So we'll talk about the companies and there's some of their services they offer in just a minute. So just kind of pay attention, because Miss Gretchen, she has a lot to say. She's going to be sharing episode 80, which I told her just a little bit ago. That's a great number. Right, Miss Gretchen?
Absolutely. Good morning.
And good morning. And she's going to be speaking on the power of pre-decisions and leading yourself. All right? If you were in the city, it'd be leading yourself. Okay, that's how you say it. So, Miss Gretchen, thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
thank you, Brent.
And it was great meeting you at the T&D Trainers Conference last February.
Yeah.
It was wonderful, and your keynote was fantastic. It was like, oh my gosh, she's got to be part of this, and she's got to speak. And so she's like, yeah, we'll do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jen has enjoyed, and she really got me into what ECOS does, and just part of the give back. So, you know, DaVinciSKY Group as well as OneSpan, we're happy to be here today. And especially we're going to talk about you.
Nice.
Not so much as safety within our companies, but really how safety starts with you.
Yeah. So, Miss Jen, tell us, let's go back. And tell us how you got started in this industry.
Yeah, so I am one of 3 children, Atlanta natives, just a little north of Atlanta. And actually, I got my start as a high school principal. I retired from that when I was 30-ish. And, you know, number 1 rule, never be afraid. If you're not happy with what you're doing, turn around and go find what makes you thrive. And so I went back to Georgia Tech, got my degree in electrical engineering. And from there, I already knew a lot about the electrical arena. My grandfather was a regional manager for Georgia Power, and then he kind of stepped up through the ranks. So it was already in my blood.
Yeah.
I was 9 and I could name the components on the line.
Wow.
So.
Wow. No, that's awesome. And then, so tell us a little bit about the services of OneSpan in the DaVinci Group. Tell us your services.
Yeah, so DaVinciSKY Group, we have 3 different companies up under that umbrella. And we do everything. Of course, you guys have heard us with the helicopter services that we offer, but we also do some engineering, EPC, and we also do oversight and safety training. So there's a plethora because it's all connected.
Right. Yeah. And then how about the OneSpan Powerline services?
That's just helicopters.
Yeah.
We interface with a lot of the companies, especially ground contractors. You might know us from servicing the larger utilities and even some of the EMCs, especially when they fall under NERC for on the grid. You know, you've got to have so many miles of transmission, and then so we will augment that to do inspections, construction, or maintenance.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'm excited. Miss Gretchen's here, and this is going to be an awesome episode. So pay attention and keep these words and activate and then enable her words into your companies, your organizations, and right here as well. All right, Miss Gretchen.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for tuning in. I know time is precious every single day. You know, and we get to choose how we spend our time. And even that is part of pre-decision making. But, you know, we also spend so much time talking about sustainability and resilience on the grid. That's mostly what you guys are actually participating in on a daily basis. But today we're going to talk about your sustainability, your resilience, and it's going to be all about you. Because before we can do anything with anybody else, we've got to be able to basically lead ourselves. It's the number 1 thing that you make a decision to do every single day. So we're going to get started. Again, you guys got started off in education and kind of ran through those ranks very quickly, but then when I got to where I was like, oh, this is very political. I'm very black and white. I don't know if I'm really made to do this. One time I had a superintendent. She was like, you've got to learn to play the game. I was like, I don't know about that. So I went back, got my PE in electrical engineering. I do some activities on NERC with IEEE. Really right now getting into drones and drone benchmarking, exactly what needs to happen within the utility. So if your utility has any drone questions, you can always reach out to me directly. Very well versed in that and can help with that. We're kind of lost in that arena right now. So I really like to give back with that program. Also, my favorite thing is I am Matt's wife. He flies jets, I fly helicopters. Often that's kind of a quandary at dinner, and it's like, well, look, I can land that helicopter anywhere. You need 5,000 feet of runway to land that jet. Also, mom to Katie, I am a sassy. Became a grandparent 4 years ago, have 2 grandchildren, sister, aunt, daughter, and I love all those titles. And today we're going to be talking, like I said, about you and all of your titles and what do we do with those titles. Because what we do with those titles often gives us the keys to finding joy in everyday life. And I think that that's very important, because the last thing that we want to do is to spend 8 to 12, 16 hours during storm doing something that is not rewarding to us. So we're going to get started. Okay, so this is a funny little picture. This was every year I take all the back office girls on a trip, and that day we were doing goat yoga. We were doing something new, and one of my guys, I was actually interviewing this gentleman, and he goes, well, you probably don't know where I live. And I said, well, just try me. And he says, well, I live in Homosassa. I said, I did goat yoga in Homosassa. So, but today we're going to talk about 8 habits. And I live by these 8 habits. And guys, I was not one of those people that just naturally came out of the gate being well disciplined, making sure that, I was making my bed and doing, those well-versed things, drinking my 3 ounces of water with squeezed lemon, Some of those things I've adapted as, you get closer to 60, I'm 2 years from 60 now. So I do adopt some of those things, and especially as, that health culture changes for those of you that are really into that. But there are foundational things that we need to be doing every single day of our life. And especially when we're talking started ECOS and the electric culture of safety and the way that this ties in, 92% of accidents started way back at the beginning of the day. They rarely happen toward the end of the day. It actually prematurely happened in the morning. Okay, so when we start, getting to what we call root cause analysis, most of the time you can point right back to the beginning part of the day. So we're going to talk about these. So the habit of no snooze. Now, depending on whether you're a morning person or whether you're that night owl, the habit of no snooze actually is the very first foundation that we're going to start building our block off of. Because the habit of no snooze means that we are continually hitting our phone, or some of you may actually have an older alarm clock, and you're just falling back to sleep, hitting it again, falling back to sleep, hitting it again. And actually the brain activity that goes on behind the scenes that most of the time we're not even aware of is that we already interpret that as one failure when we hit the snooze button. Because we didn't get up, we had already predetermined that we were going to get up at a certain amount of time, and we chose not to. So basically, you're saying, I'm not choosing my predetermined habit, okay? So the habit of no snooze, and the more that you hit it, the more failure you experience on the front part of your frontal cortex. So it's very important when you set that snooze button, that do not hit it a second time or a third time or a fourth time, because we are interpreting that as failure. Even though consciously we do not see that like that, right? We just think, oh, 15 more minutes. But isn't it funny how that 15 minutes seems like 5 seconds? So why do it anyway? Just train your brain. As soon as you're not going to hit the snooze button, you hit the alarm, and you immediately get out of bed. And then today we're even going to go deeper into the power, and it's the habit, but it is also power in pre-decisioning. I'm sure that you can go back to some parental advice when your parents said, you're going to do these things. I remember when my daughter she was little, and I said, I don't care if you go to vocational school or college, but you're going to do one or the other. You're not just going to, try to figure out what you're doing. And so I was already helping her the pre-decision, vocational or college. And, also we kind of needed to see how she went through her high school years, and where did I think that her gifting was going to be. But already talking about, we're going to be making these pre-decisions from 9th to 12th grade. What do we want to be doing, or at least what do we want to try, right? My brother, my parents, with this pre-decision, they had always decided, I was sharing with Brent and Jen last night that my dad had went to Vietnam, and he was a great entrepreneur, but he also, no college, but at least he went into the military. That's pre-decision, military, vocational. But the one thing about my dad, because he wanted something so much different for his 3 kids, was he wanted to pre-decide for us. All of you are going to college. You've got 3 months before you hit college. If you don't go to college, then my pre-decision is you're on your own and you go figure it out. But what my dad failed to realize is that the makeup with my 2 brothers, of course, I went straight on, but Kevin and Brian, they needed that extra time. Brian never went, but he went to vocational school. Kevin tried college. It was a little bit too much fun for him, and my dad showed up and packed him up and took him back home. He had to work at my dad's company until he decided that this is what I want to do, right? So sometimes as parents, and those of you that you've got those teenage kids, you need to be paying attention and don't pre-decide that this is a one track in college. College isn't what it used to be. And I truly believe that our vocational schools right now, where we're getting that training, can be so important, and never negate that, because the skills, the trades, linemen, carpenters, plumbers, electricians, you guys can see that we're trending toward, we have vacancies in all of those occupational training. So never pre-decide without looking at the whole context, right? Next, the habit of you first. This is so predisposed. Our world doesn't necessarily say you first. And, we can go back to no matter what religion you are or whatever you believe in, but, putting others before yourself. And just a personal story, when I became a business owner, this didn't come naturally to me at all. I had been this renegade salesperson, and had made, I was a single mom, and I was just used to taking care of myself and Katie. And so this took me a while to realize that now it's my responsibility to take care of others before myself. So that means that, if I can't make payday, then I don't get paid first, right? And so those of you that are leaders, whether it's a budget that you're dealing with, whether you're on the line and you're a foreman or a general foreman, superintendent, whatever you're doing out there, the you first means that we're always going to put whatever we're dealing with, whether it's safety, whether it's financial, whether emotional support, putting your feelings to the side. Sometimes that doesn't come naturally, and you need to work at that. And one of my favorite podcasts that I listened to, especially when I was realizing that, these people come before I do now. These people deserve the best, my best foot forward. And even though I'm not having a good day, it doesn't mean that I bring that into the culture. And I think that, just putting others first is not innate to us. And we actually have to practice that. So whatever you need to do, whatever you've got to improve on to the habit of you first, you need to do a deep dive into that. And like I said, sometimes, whether it's your feelings that you've got to put aside, maybe you've got something going on with a loved one, you're taking care of an elderly parent, you've got a child that's struggling, maybe it's your marriage. What is it that you are having a difficult time with, but yet you're in that leadership position? You've got to put that aside, and you've got to remember that, you're going to have to pick that up. So compartmentalization is very important. One of my favorite podcasts is Craig Groeschel. If some of you could take a look, he was very ingenuitive in me helping to overcome that me first. You're trying to put that aside because you're going to become you first, to be a true and ethical, a person of integrity along with character. What are you going to do for the people that are looking up to you? So if you need help in that, Craig Groeschel, I recommend him. The habit of doing the hard right. This isn't, we're talking about like driving down and you got to take a hard right. Sometimes it is the most difficult thing for us to do, something that's very hard, but yet it's the right thing to do. That is one of the biggest quandaries that a leader has, because you're trying to think of your crew as a whole. You're trying to think as your company as a whole. What are you going to have to do to make the hard decisions? I think one of my something that just really took a toll on me was there were 3 people that started off our company, and there was some decisions to be made. And so when we were talking about, we needed to, this was like one of those times where you're sitting there and you're thinking basically this lineman had taken our truck, and he was supposed to get on a plane. He had checked out of his hotel and he could not be found, but our truck was missing too. And come to find out, he was down in downtown Baltimore. But when I did a very deep dig, at first everybody was like, oh, we need to prosecute. Oh, we need to. And I was like, let's just pause and let's see what is going on behind the scenes. And come to find out, it was the Christmas holiday. It was Christmas Eve. It was the 23rd. And come to find out, he didn't have a place to go during Christmas. And so immediately I sprung into action trying to, this is what we could do. And then when I spoke to him, I said, well, what about your mom? What about your dad? Tell me a little bit. Well, he starts telling me that he hasn't spoken to them in years. And so at that point in time, I said, well, would you mind if I called your mom? And he said, well, I don't know if this number works. And I said, well, let's just try it, And even though I had a business partner that was like, no, we are pressing charges, and I was like, no, you know what? I want to do the hard right here, and I'm not going to go along with that, and so I'm going to call this mom. So sure enough, I call the mom. She begins to sob, and she was like, well, I would love to, but I don't have enough money. I said, I can get you money. I can get you a hotel room. And even though everybody was like, we don't need to handle this way, sometimes you just have to do what you think is right. And even though it was against the grain, it wasn't normal, you know, to this day, I still hear from that lineman, and he is doing so much better. He's got relationships with his family. So if you really feel strongly about doing the hard right, and guys, it can go opposite too. There's been times when, you know, I've had to set the precedent that, hey, if you choose that, you can't work here. You know, because with every decision, there is a counter reaction, right? So the hard right is sometimes, what do you believe that you need to do first? And second of all, just because it's acceptable or unacceptable, you still have to make that decision. And a lot of times when we talk more about pre-decisioning later on today, we're going to be going back to this doing the hard right. Let's talk about the touching the line. Do you remember when, and this is going to date those, but do you remember when you had the erasers and then you would run to, like, you know, a couple of feet, and then you would take the eraser back, then you would go a little further, and then you'd bring the eraser back, and then you'd go all the way, and you'd bring the, and I don't remember the name of that, but it was something like the shuffle or something like that. You know, when you're given a task, no matter what and what your job assignment is, no matter what your expectations are from an employer, always doing exactly what is expected. And it's not always going to be right? But then the leadership, so if you're a lineman and you are, maybe you're supposed to repair the jumper, but you get up there and you even see some other things that, oh, even if I make this repair, it's still not going to solve the problem. I'm going to have to climb back down and come back up here. Then you do that. You touch the line, right? Not necessarily the power line, but you're going to touch the line and you're going to finish with excellence. And excellence is kind of lost in our culture right now. You know, we're not really trained that way. Now it's more about shortcuts. Well, we've been doing it that way for the past 20 years. Nothing has ever happened. Well, you need to decide, and that is pre-decisioning. Am I going to be a person of excellence? You know, when no one is looking, and we hear this all the time, what do you do when no one is looking? It's not even about that. It's more about, who do you want to be? Because if you don't want to be a person of excellence, you're actually choosing the opposite. Making a decision on not being a person of excellence is a pre-decision, right? So no matter what you're doing, you always want to be a person of excellence, whether you've got 50 people looking, but even yourself, because that is where most of the calamity starts, when we feel internally that we aren't a person of excellence. So we're always going to touch the line. And then, just to build on that, we're going to do one more rep. I was listening to this guy the other day on YouTube, and he was talking about working out. You know, as I get older, I've been learning a little bit more about, you know, exercising and you know, building muscle, because the number one thing for longevity is not so much cardio as it is muscle resilience. Meaning, you know, how much stress can we put on our muscles, on our skeletal muscle? And that is the number one indicator of longevity. And it is how strong we are. Not so much cardio and, you know, running. You know, we were just talking a minute ago about how, you know, we grew up in this no fat, low fat, do all the cardio, and then basically what does it do? It throws our cortisol through the roof, right? So right here it's talking about doing one more rep, and the guy said for everybody that we're doing 3 sets of reps, whether, you know, you're doing a squat or whether you're doing, you know, deadlifts or whatever you're doing, if you did one more rep, that cumulative over the year, you would have done an extra 1,200 lifts. So what is that going to do for our bodies at the end of the year, right? And that was just one more rep per set. And I thought, wow, it ended up being like 1,243 some odd reps. And you think about that. So think about the longevity tied to just one more rep. So sometimes it's not the big things, it's the tiny little things that we do every day that make such a difference. And the habit of fueling the fire. When we take a look at what we fuel, whether we're fueling our bodies with nutrition, whether we're fueling our minds with what are you listening to? I always say I had I had this habit of when I would finish working, and this was early on when I started my company. I was working 14, 16 hours a day. And so just to have something mind-numbing, I would dead scroll. I would watch housewives, people fighting and fussing, right? And finally, I had to say, is this fueling my fire or is this numbing my fire? Is this giving me something that's going to feed my soul? Is this, and this isn't about, I have a son-in-law that loves to hunt. And, my daughter one day, she was like, oh, all he wants to do. And I said, you need to let him watch that. And those of you can go home and say, this lady told me today on this podcast that you need to let me watch that, right? But when you're sharpening a skill, maybe you learn about a different bow. The other day, Forrest was telling me about this compound bow that he heard about. And so I was questioning him, well, tell me more about this. But fueling your fire, how are you doing that? What hobbies do you enjoy doing? My daughter asked me the other day, she said, Mom, what do you want for Christmas? And I said, I would like a new sewing machine. It's something that I can do. I feel successful. It's definitely a lost art. Some of you may have grandmothers, and there's very few sewers in today's world, but that is something that I like to do. So now I like to look up crafts. I like to kind of get that artistic side of my brain going, because most of the time I'm looking at KMZs, I'm looking at lines, and it just kind of brings that back into my life. So what are you fueling your fire? What do you enjoy doing? Is it playing with your kids? What are you investing? Right now I am very, very big on dead scrolling. Right now, the average person is going to lose 7 years of their life to what we call dead scrolling, meaning you're just going through, you're just looking at, and especially with Facebook, Instagram, comparing yourself to others. To me, there's only one standard in my life. I don't need to be comparing myself to anybody that is here on this earth, right? So what are you comparing yourself? How many hours per day are you dead scrolling? They say the average person spends 2.5 hours of dead scrolling per day. Now, what if you took that 2.5 hours and you are fueling your fire by having a conversation with that friend, spending time with your wife and kids or your husband? That was something when I first started my company. I was struggling. My husband had been my biggest supporter to get it off the ground, and then all of a sudden, I'm not spending time with my biggest supporter. But yet I'm using all of our family money to do it. So I ask you, what are you doing? What are you fueling your relationships with? What are you fueling with your own self? What podcast are you listening to? What hobbies are you investing in? You know, we all need downtime, and I know children, extended family, spouse, friends, you know, we run so hard in this life that we are living right now. But you've got to fuel yourself before you fuel others. So how are you fueling your fire, and then how are you fueling the fires around you? You know, there was a time with my company that, and I'm especially speaking to people that are leading utilities or divisions within utilities or with ground contractors, when you are taking a look at how you're leading, you know, with this fueling the fire, what are you doing and how are you assessing what your crews need, your divisions need? What are you doing to figure out what they need? We went through, on the DaVinciSKY group side, we started doing some things for our leadership. And it was just so funny that we were in a business setting, but as we were talking, people were talking about just personal things. And I learned so much about what was going on in people's lives and what could I do to bless that situation. You know, what can I say? And it was just, I saw them actually feeding each other. So when you think about your organization, and if you are a top leader, you need to be figuring out, how am I fueling my own fire? What do you think about on the drive home? When do you have that dedicated time? I'm also big into time blocking for yourself. On my calendar, I'm usually up around 4:30 every morning. But what was happening is I didn't have a problem with hitting the snooze. That's never been one of my problems. My problem is if I'm out after 9 o'clock, I just become, you know, so I kind of zone out. It's like, past my bedtime. But what was happening is that I was hitting the snooze button and I was hitting the ground, but this right here, the habit of fueling, what was happening is that I was getting that mixed up. So I was hitting the ground and then I was letting the world hit me, not me hit the world, right? So what you want to do is you want to decide what you do first thing in the morning. What's going to be your routine? Like, first thing I do, I have 2 dogs, labs, and I let them out. And while I let them out, I feed them, they're eating, and then I come back and I do my coffee. And then I sit down in the quiet wee hours of the morning and I have some time to kind of think about the day, do a Bible study, you know, whatever you want to do. But do not let the day control you. You control your day. There's going to be enough happening later on in the day that's going to like come at you. So you take control for that first hour, hour and a half of your day, then let the world come at you. But no matter what, you're in control of those first thoughts in the morning. And then number 8, I always talk about this. I went through a very, very difficult time in 2023. And I had made some decisions with the company, and not only that, it involved a move back to Georgia where I was. My husband was flying for a company over in Alabama at that time, and then we had decided that a business partner and I were going to separate. And it was one of the hardest things that I've ever went through. And it almost felt like a death. And I remember one morning I was laying in that bed and I was like, I just don't want to get out. I mean, I didn't hit the snooze button. I had barely slept all night just from the ramifications of moving back to Georgia, moving the company, separating from this business partner. It almost felt like a death, a divorce. You know, it was overwhelming. And sometimes in those overwhelming moments, it is so hard for us to pre-decision our day. It is so hard for us to predetermine what's going to happen. That's really when I started, and if any of you would like to hear more about that story, you know, when you're making those life tumultuous changes, you know, how do you know what to do? What does that look like for you? And, you know, whether or not you fall back on your faith, whether you fall back on friends and family, helping to, you know, lead you through those hard times, you know, how do you show back up? And, but the first thing is you got to get out of bed and you got to show back up. No matter how hard things are, you have to predetermine that I'm going to show back up. I am getting out of this bed and I'm going to show back up no matter what. Because that's the first step. That's the baby step that's going to help you to predetermine what is going to happen from there on out. And also, that baby step is the smallest yet biggest step you will take. And if you think back any time where we've had very hard decisions to make, it was just that first thing of I'm going to show back up, right? You had a fight this morning with your wife. You're going to show back up loving. That's a pre-decision. You've got a child that's very difficult. They're the hardest one of the bunch. You know, my dad had one of those, and that was my middle brother. But now, my dad always said, you know, Kevin just needed something different than you and Brian, and I had to realize that I had to show up for Kevin in a different way than Gretchen and Brian. So how you show back up, but the main thing is you've got to show back up. So even in a bad friendship, maybe you got off kilter with someone, but you having enough courage to show back up, even with that employee yesterday, that talk that didn't go so well, and both of you left a little, you know, you've had sleeping on it, call that employee back in and say, hey, I just want to go back over that, you know, and what are you going to do and what do you need to do to show back up? But it is very important for every single time that you show back up in difficult times. And not only that, when it comes to leadership, if you are in a leadership position, you showing back up is the #1 key to let your employees know, or anyone that's reporting to you, that you care. But showing back up is very important. So let's talk about 3 secrets to lead yourself. Now, leading yourself, you've got to be able to do this. And as I told you before, I had worked by myself for so many years. I was a renegade salesperson, became very good at solving problems within utilities, just was able to come in and kind of look at the whole utility and then how things are feeding, whether your CIS was going into your GIS, and then what were you doing for your workflow. And I would go in and I would solve all of these problems. But back then, I was doing a great job at leading myself, but people would say, start your own company. You know, you would be so good at it. And I was like, well, I don't know about that. I don't want employees. And sure enough, I think it's so funny that sometimes when you think you are the least qualified person to do something, you actually learn that you are very qualified at doing something. And my experience was I got called to Puerto Rico And I was over at the engineering group with FEMA, and basically I realized I really like the camaraderie. I really like working with other people, and I had become so immune to actually working with other people, not being the consultant to figure out a problem, but really harmonizing with others to be able to look at several different solutions all together. And so the longer I stayed there, the more I began being led, hey, you can do this. You can have your own company. Look at what all the joy you're finding in working with people, even on the tough days, even on those hard days. I mean, guys, we had trucks to go down mountains, you know, because there was a mudslide. It was still very wet. You know, we would have no work days, and we would feel like we were getting further and further behind. And you know, even though you had the problems, you still had a group there solving the problem. And if there is one thing, and leaders, we all lead in a very different style, right? But there are some things that I will be the last decision. Then there's other things that I'm going to go to my executive leadership and I'm going to ask them, what do they think about X, Y, Z? But sometimes I go to my line crew and I want to know what they think before I approach the executive leadership. Why? Because they understand the safety of things. They understand the field experience. They have a different schemata than my executive leadership. So always think about the different groups of people up underneath you that's going to be able to give you the most valuable information before you make a decision. So before you can lead anyone else, you've got to be able to lead yourself. And even though, you know, when I first started the company, I was doing a very good job at leading myself. But again, you've got to have the holistic approach of thinking, you know, I have everything from pilots to mechanics to line crews to back office staff and executive leadership. So you've got to get all of those groups together to create the harmony within a company. So 3 secrets to lead yourself, they feed into that harmonization amongst the entire company. So what you consume, I've already spoke, you know, a little bit about this, but guys, what we consume actually is what we become. And if you think, oh, that dead scrolling has no effect on me, well, I don't know about you, but I don't want to lose 7 years of my life looking at what other people think is important. I want to figure out what I think is important, and then I want it to be profitable to my soul, right? Another thing I started doing is I only allow myself to consume emails during a certain point of the day. After 6 o'clock, I do not look at emails unless somebody says, I just sent you an email, need you to look at it now. In my company, we have a 911. That means helicopter down, man down, someone seriously injured. It is major. Then we have 111, which means we might ought to look at this within the next hour or two. So come up with your codes within your companies so that, because people would say, oh, we got 911, and it was like the accountant is pitching a fit needing to know what that check was written for. And it was like, that is not a 911. So what you consume is especially important. You know, one of the things that I don't do anymore is I don't watch certain things after 6 o'clock. I want to be able to sleep well. I don't look at emails after 6 o'clock unless somebody says, hey, I really need you to look at this. or maybe there's a change in schedule, you know, whatever it is. But, you know, training yourself into what you consume, how you consume it, and the timeliness of the consumption is very important, because there's so much that we can look at, and every day we are pre-decisioning what we want to put in our brains, you know, very similar to what we do with nutrition. You know, we were talking about that last night. So what do you consume from social media, TV, and radio, right? What kind of music do you listen to? And then let's talk about what you consume as far as nutrition. You know, we were just talking about we grew up, my generation came up through oh, you don't eat fat. No, we actually need fat, right? We need meat. We need all this kind of, we need nutrients for our bodies. So what are you consuming? How, you know, are you going to actually be able to operate at optimal sufficiency by eating junk food all day long and drinking your slushie? No. And especially linemen, you know, that was one of the things when I go and I visit the field, I always take food, right? They love food. So whether I'm going out to the right of way or whether I'm meeting them back at the hotel, you know, what are we going to consume? And so print material, media, television, radio, and then also think about your consumption for optimal brain health, right? Optimal body health. What are you consuming? That was something that I basically about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, I got very serious as I was like, oh, I'm closer to 60 than I am 55. I need to start thinking about this. So I encourage you to think about that. What are you looking at? What are you listening to? What are you feeding your body with? And what are you feeding your soul with? The next thing, what you attempt. You don't grow by doing what you did, okay? Just like I was telling you that I had kind of peaked out before I went to Puerto Rico, that I, as an individual, had kind of, for about a year and a half, 2 years there really wasn't another place for me to go other than to just go get another customer, go solve another problem, but I was doing what I always did. And then I realized that I was really hunting for more. So what is that? You know, do you need to leave to get promoted? And leaders, I ask you that question. Are you pulling internally, or do people have to leave your company to get promoted? So your employees are not going to grow if they're doing what they've always done. And if there's no growth pattern for that employee to be able to rise through the ranks, expect them to leave. They need to leave, because life is about change. My dad passed away from cancer when I was 37, and those last couple of months before he passed away, I think he knew he was on a timeline. Of course he did. And he told me several things. He said, number one, life is about change, and if you can't change, you will never grow and you will never be fulfilled. So embrace change. So I'm asking leaders that when you take a look at what you are doing with your employees, are you allowing them to go through different growth modes, and what does that look like? Or do they have to leave your company to get promoted, because they are not going to be able to get better by doing the same thing day in, day out? I'd also challenge everybody that's on this call is that, what are you doing for training? Are you doing the same old every single year? Right now we're in training mode for our company, and we always do it the first 2 weeks in January, somewhere right in there. And we never do the same thing twice, never. You've got to be able to be challenging to people, to challenge their inner strength. You've got to be able to see and identify what they need. And the best way to do that is not for, just a group of people to decide what they need. You need to be engaging at every single level. For us, what do our linemen need? What do our mechanics need? What do our pilots need? What does the back office need? What does the executive leadership team need? Do we need to mix it up? And we always include personal growth. Personal growth, we did a wonderful study, and I don't know if any of you guys have done this yet, but we did, we used to do these personality, identifiers where, whether it was the DISC, the Briggs, Riley, or something like that. And basically, that was just talking about the personality. Well, now we do the Enneagram. And one of the things that the Enneagram does is it talks about your behavior, why you do something. And so we did the Enneagram the year before, and then this past year, we did the Enneagram within the workplace. So we had everybody, like I'm an 8 wing 1. That means, like, for me, justice, fairness, challenging. I've always got to have something challenging going on. But more so than anything is, like, once you're in my tribe, I'm kind of like, and they give you these idioms that I'm kind of like a marshmallow with barbed wire, is the way that the lady described it. And so it takes a while to get in my circle, but once you're in my circle, nobody is going to mess with you, because loyalty, my loyalty to you, your loyalty to me is the most meaningful relationship that I will have. So I learned that about myself, and I was like, oh my goodness, I am. And then I forgot what ones were, but it's more about leadership, achieving. But there's weaknesses on that too, and we're going to talk about weaknesses in a minute. But with the weaknesses, I really learned, I thought, oh, that is a weakness of mine. Ouch, that hurts, right? So if you're doing the same thing year after year, you might want to look into doing something different. In our training group, we've got an extensive training group, and we are always here to share with what we are doing within our training. And last, who you surround yourself with. And sometimes this is going to change with seasons, right? Do you remember when you first got married and maybe you were the first one to get married in your group of friends, and then you realized that, oh, I don't really fit in with the single guys anymore or the single girls anymore. I've got my spouse. Who you surround yourself with, they need to be better than you, smarter than you, wiser than you. And you also want to kind of look at, what do those people bring to the table? What is it about that person that you want to be more like them? So I want you to think and do a self-inventory today on, what are you looking at? What are you fueling yourself with? What are you attempting? And then last but not least, who are you around? Those things are going to play into your excellence with everything that you do each and every day. So the next one, I hope you guys can see this, is kind of, can you see it? Okay. So impressing versus connecting. And I was reading a study the other day, and I asked my husband, I was like, is this true? And then my business partner, man of very little words, so if he ever says anything, you better listen up. And I said, is this true when we're dealing with, the male brain? And so one of the things things is, I said, connecting is different than impressing. And so Mike and I began to talk about that because he said, you know, men don't necessarily have to connect, which is true because men do a much better job of being compartmentalizing. So as they compartmentalize information, you know, whether I need to go by the grocery store, I'll do that later on. He's not thinking about that all day long. Whereas a woman, she is going to actually process that, and she's going to be constantly reminding herself, oh, I need to go run this errand. He's compartmentalized. So connecting for men is also kind of, have you ever seen those old-timey apothecaries, and like they bring out one drawer and then there might be like 30 drawers, 30 little bitty drawers? Well, they actually have to shut that drawer before they can open the next thought. Whereas women, we're like like if you take a floss or a wire and it's just all messed up, or your computer cord, it can all be raveled up and we're just hopping from one thing to another, right? My husband is always telling me, complete that first thought so I can shut my box and open the next one. I'm still way back here, right? So connecting is very, it is actually a way that our brains takes information, and how we connect it matters. Now, connecting versus impressing, where we have that is in our daily work. Of course, we want to be impressive. We want to be knowledgeable. We want to be able to do our job with excellence. But connecting is what is going to bring us, with what we're here today talking about, is when we connect our brains with our job, and when we are basically putting all of those safety guidelines into one box. We want to connect with that, not just be impressive on the line. And so when we're talking about line work, whether we're talking about leadership, executive staffs, we do not need to be worried about impressing your higher ups, or that foreman or the GF on the job, or that superintendent. Connecting what you need to be doing on the line is going to automatically make you impressive. So I want you to separate those two things. Also, misconception of leading with your heart. A lot of times, especially in line work, we kind of just negate that, you know, I don't need to lead with empathy, sympathy. However, research says that our best leaders are empathetic, not just sympathetic. And I just want to bring that to your attention, because naturally this sometimes doesn't come as easy as it does, and it's really not. Research shows us that sympathetic or empathetic leadership doesn't really have to do with our gender at all. It has to do with our upbringing. So I encourage you to not to be fearful to lead with your heart. There has been many a times that with my staff, and I tell them all the time, this is going to be more spiritual, and if you don't want to participate, you don't have to. You know, so don't be afraid to lead with your heart. Facts fade, but stories stick. I mean, come on, guys. We can sit here and we can talk facts in the line side of things until the cows come home. We have facts, we have data. Today, I've been sharing with you, hey, you got to feed your brain. You've got, you know, don't scroll and lose 7 years of your life. You know, all of those things matter, but you can be as factual as you want to be as a leader, but truthfully, the stories that we continually hear, the stories and how we interact with those, how we can apply those to certain situations is what really matters. So, especially in safety, we can hear stories, and we can go back and we can reflect on that story. Whereas factual information, we actually have to see it. So like we have to see it on a board, or we have to see something. We have to hear it, and then we have to feel it. Whereas with a story, we actually can be sympathetic, empathetic, and it can become factual with a story. So you actually use 5 different senses with a story, whereas if we're going to just be factual, we only use 3. Use words deliberately. Now, I'm going to tell you, I struggled with this because when I first started the company, I had and I kind of giggle about this now, but it was like, if you're not hearing from me, I just want you to assume you're doing great, right? But I had this one girl in the office, and the day that she left, I said, well, just tell me kind of what went wrong. I guess I'm just a little confused. Well, you never told me that I was doing a great job. And I was like, but you didn't hear me say you were doing a bad job, right? So now I do a better job of being able to say, I really appreciate you. Our safety department without Jen, or recognizing people in public. Jen, you did a great job on that. Hey, Mike, your piloting on that job was amazing. Job production was out of the world. Nobody, we just recently did a thing with these marker balls. Another company, and they were like, hey, we're not doing this. And Mike went and did it, and it was like, nobody could do that job except for you. And I meant it, So, if that is not in your natural bent, I wasn't one, like I told you, I was just this renegade salesperson. I was patting myself on the back, and that was enough for me. I didn't have to have somebody telling me, hey, great job, Gretchen. I didn't need that, right? But there are people that work under you that need that. And even though that is not in my natural bent, I had to go back and I had to start using words deliberately. And also another thing on the opposite end of the spectrum is when you don't like an idea, I am not one that's going to be politically correct. Like yesterday, this is very, very simple, but yesterday on the way up here, we were having a marketing call, and guess what? It's Christmas time, right? Coming up, it's going to be here only, I think I heard last weekend, it's like 10 Sundays before Christmas, so now we're down to 9 or something like that. But yesterday, we were talking about Christmas presents. And guys, for the last 2 weeks, we've been discussing this. And I was just like, I said, guys, I'm so tired of talking about these Christmas presents. We're going on our 9th Christmas. I'm over it. And every time somebody would say something, if I didn't like it, I just said, no, I don't like that idea. And there are times when we can become so politically correct that you end up wasting more time on menial tasks. You go back to say what you mean and mean what you say. Well, a lot of times in today's climate, we have such a difficult time with that because we're trying to be more politically correct. Well, there are times when you just need to stop it, and you just need to use your words deliberately. So whether it's dealing with your employees, hey, great job, I couldn't have done that without you, or you saying, no, we are not going to approach that job in that manner. And sometimes it may just be a gut feeling, right? My whole company laughs about, when I say I just don't have a good feeling about this, and then we try to get to the root cause analysis of why I don't have a good feeling about this. And then we kind of break it down into small patterns. But as a leader, you need to be deliberate with your words. And don't be a jerk, but just being very deliberate. so that you are not revisiting things time and time again and wasting precious time. And last but not least, use vulnerability thoughtfully. And this is more when we are going to need to talk about why we are not going to do something. It kind of goes into, what I was saying just a minute ago about, sometimes we don't really know why we're feeling that way. But, I always say feelings are God-given. And we need to use those feelings, especially in line work. We need to use those modified with facts and stories to make good, healthy decisions. So be thinking about when you're feeling vulnerable, like the marker ball job I was just talking about. I actually picked up the phone and I called the other company and said, we got a call. They're wanting us, can you tell me why you decided not to do that job? I always say this other helicopter company and I, we're frenemies. We're only enemies when we're bidding, but we're friends outside of that. And so even though that felt very vulnerable for me to call him and ask that question, it was still thoughtful to protect my own company, right? So just make sure that when you're going to be doing something or you are not just feeling super charged about something, think about it. Think about, what do I need to do to feel better about this? And if you're not willing to do things like for me to pick up the phone and call the other helicopter company, then don't do it, right? But if you're going to be vulnerable, don't worry. Figure out why you are feeling that way. Master consistency. So guys, consistency is everything. One thing, before I get into this slide, the one thing that I want you to think about is I like predictability. I like for people to be predictable to a certain extent. Unless something is going on in their life that I already know about, I like to know that when I call my business partner, I'm not having to do this temperamental mind thing about, oh, I wonder what kind of mood he is in today. So leaders that are on the call, number one, are you that kind of leader where people are going to have to calibrate your position for that day? What does that look like? So let's master consistency. Number one, start with your why. Forget your willpower. How many of you have started a diet before? And, day one you do great, but then the next morning you're going to go meet everybody down at your favorite place where you usually eat pancakes. And you really don't want scrambled eggs, bacon, and sausage, right? So 9 times out of 10, when we're trying to change a habit and master that consistency, don't go back to willpower. Like if you're a hit the snoozer, don't go back to willpower. You decide why. Why do I need to do something? Why do I need to start strength training? I started thinking about my mobility. I started looking at my mother as she's aging. I started with my why, and why am I choosing to do things differently in my late 50s, entering my 60s? So decide your why. Maybe you want to stop your dead scrolling. Maybe you want to stop drinking altogether. Maybe you want to start going to church. Maybe you want to start helping out your wife that's got 3 kids that's staying at home all day, and you want to do something nice. So for 30 minutes, you're going to allow her some alone time. What's your why? What do you need to do to be a person of excellence? And what do you have to do to master that consistency? You've got to get to the root cause of why you want to do it. I had a hip replacement when I was in my late 40s, And so right after, I used to run all the time. I loved to run in marathons, and it was like my thing. Well, after my hip replacement, I was like, oh, now all I have to do is walk. Well, I found that to be very mundane. It was so slow. It was boring. And I actually was like, well, I don't know that I'm getting that much good from all this walking I'm doing. So I kind of just stopped exercising altogether. Well, then I basically was like, well, I've got to do something. And I started doing a deep dive on what is the healthiest thing that I could be doing. And then I started doing some classes, but really what I needed during that time was, why did I want to do them? Because I wasn't motivated about going. And then I started learning a little bit more about, well, what was my mobility going to be looking like in my 70s? Because I noticed my mom, she had a hip replacement, she had 2 knee replacements, and I was like, oh, the more I looked at that, my why started becoming very much more clear, right? So, what's your why? What do you want to change? And also, just what do you like about yourself, and what are you not satisfied about yourself with? So take those 2 things, and also go gentle on yourself, right? I mean, there's a lot that we can improve, but there's also a lot that's very good about you. So what are those good things? And also, don't be afraid. Nobody is going to be an advocate for you like you. So what are some good things that you already know that exist about you? Habit number 2, plan to fail. Not everything is going to go well. It is amazing to me in this world of, Nike. You look at the Coke ads. You look at all of those, those drug ads. I'm like, oh my God, why would you take anything if all of those side effects are going to, the medication is going to fail you anyway. But it's this all or none mindset. And guys, we're not going to be perfect all the time. That diet that you're wanting to start, you're not always going to be perfect. The next day, just get back up and go about it again. You didn't exercise one day. Well, guess what? Sleep might have been more valuable to you on that day than an exercise program. So get rid of the all or none mindset. This world puts pressure on us that we have to be perfect. You do not have to be perfect. You're never going to be perfect. But I love it that we get to start over. Every single day is a new day. It's a new start. So think about, what if I'm not up to my optimum on this day? I'm going to start new tomorrow. Go to bed and forget it. Again, and that kind of goes back to what I was talking about. After 6 o'clock, I limit some things so that I can sleep well, so I can get a clear mind and think about something later on that maybe I didn't solve today. Torrance's test of creativity basically tells us that we come up with our most innovative and best ideas when we're doing something mundane. Like brushing your teeth, in the shower, washing your hair, driving down the road. Just those mundane activities, when our mind is clear, we can actually do a reset and a rethink on certain things that we necessarily weren't able to solve at that given moment, or in that moment, in the minute of that moment. Also, habit number 3, fall in love with the process. Yesterday I was listening to a podcast, and I love this question she posed. She said, what are you waiting to start living for? And why are you not living in the moment that you're in? And I think that is a very important question, because how many times do we say, oh, we're going to take that vacation when we've got more money. Oh, we're going to, or I'm going to wait till everything is perfect, and then once I get this paid off, this done, I'll do X, Y, Z. What is it that you're putting off living for? Because the process, we need to be living in the process. And I think sometimes when hard things come, we're overwhelmed at work. We've got employee issues. We're short linemen. We're just waiting to get it just perfect. We're not going to ever get it just perfect. So learning to live in that moment and the consistency is, don't look at it as a singular event. It's part of the process, right? Sometimes I think that, especially at utilities, guys, you've seen this. Oh, I've got 3 years, 24 days, 5 minutes, and 86 seconds left, and I retire. Well, go ahead and enjoy what you're doing every day. So consistency is often looked at as an event. It's a lifestyle process. One thing that sets good leaders apart is what they do consistently, not occasionally. And good leaders are constantly tapping into, what do we need to be doing today? What do we need to be looking forward for tomorrow? What do we need to be putting money into our employees? The other day, I was talking with my controller about, hey, I take the back office ladies on a trip every year. And he was like, well, how much is that going to cost him? What, blah, 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 And he wanted all of this information. It was like, well, I haven't even done it yet. I need to talk to them and let's see what we're going to do this year, right? But he wanted all the facts, all the budget, life isn't like that. Sometimes you need to be tapping into, that's a very simplistic example, but you need to be just part of the anticipation of something is the planning, right? And one of the things that we do is we bring everybody into Peachtree City, and we do all different kinds of things together. We do some activities that we're building stuff, and last year we were building these bridges and we had to figure out teamwork. But then we also talked a little bit about, what's our Enneagram number, so that we can learn to work together. Like I said, a lot of times me consistently praising people that need that affirmation didn't come to me very easy, and I had to learn that. So leaders, some of this is going to take you some time to go back and say, what can I do for my staff? What can I do for my family? What can I do for myself? So I want you to think into those 3 buckets. What are you going to do with the information that you learned today? But mastering consistency is probably one of the most important things that you're going to do. No matter how hard it is, even if it's outside your bent of your normal way that you lead. Next, think possibilities, not problems. So this is my little, she's got Husky and Lab in her, but it was Emmy today, she's named after Amelia Earhart, and Emmy showed up in my yard. And Emmy has, she got integrated with Einstein and Tesla, and she was when she first showed up to me, I was like, oh my gosh, the last thing I need is another dog, But I started telling Matt, well, Einstein is aging, and just think, she could be Tesla's friend, So I talked Matt into, he was like, well, we're going to take her to the vet, make sure that she's not chipped, and you know, and then we'll decide if we're going to keep her. Well, I'd already decided that the possibility of me keeping her was going to be yes, and she was going to become a part of my problem, meaning a part of my 3-dog problem when I need dog sitters when I travel. So I want you to see your problems as possibilities. You know, I was telling you about that real difficult time, and one of the things is that, you know, when we were talking about taking the company in another direction and the leadership in another direction, I had to think about the possibilities and not focus on the problem, you know, because you've got to move forward. No matter what you're doing or where you're at, you've got to move forward. If you're an apprentice lineman, you're still moving forward because you need to get to JL, you need to get to foreman, you want to get to GF. You always are going to be moving forward in life. So just because there's a problem, that doesn't mean that that stops all possibility. See that possibility as your movement forward. What are you going to do to change the trajectory, right? And I want to acknowledge the weight of a problem, how it makes us feel. It weighs on us. However, you know, your fear of a problem can actually stagnate you into being still. So my question is there something that is making you stagnant? Are you bored in your job? Are you afraid to go and ask for that next position? So if it's time for you to move up, you need to go and ask for that movement up. You need to be looking for that change if you're stagnant. And sometimes the fear of rejection, the fear of I'm not good enough, the fear of, oh, he's probably going to be next in line. If you want it, you ask for it. And I want you to really realize that sometimes fear can just, it can take a toll on us actually, you know, pivoting yourself into something that's better for you. So are you needing that growth? So just because there's a problem, maybe your crew is so tiny and you know if you left right now, that's going to stagnate that crew, but we still have to take care of our own personal growth first. So I encourage you not to, the weight of how it makes us feel, do not let that stagnate you moving forward. Next, Colin Powell, when people quit bringing you problems, you have failed as a leader. So as a leader, sometimes when people are consistently talking to us about a problem and all they do is bring problems to you, sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, can you not solve that, right? Never take that type of attitude, because if you do that, people will quit bringing you problems and then you're no longer needed. So when people bring you problems, that means that you're still an open door and that you're still valuable because they are bringing you problems. Never see that as that they are not capable of solving it, but also encourage those younger folks that have leadership capabilities. Most of the time we can see that, especially in that age group 34 to 37. We can really start seeing that group coming into their early 40s, whether or not they are problem solvers, right? And 9 times out of 10, they'll say, their language will be something like this: we've got a problem out in the field, and I was thinking that this might, and they'll start talking in that type of language to you. I was thinking that this might be a solution, but, you know, and then if you need to redirect or add some more, you know, thought-provoking language to help them think the whole problem through, do that. But at least they're still bringing it to you to help them solve the problem. Also, you've got to fix how you think about things as a leader. Sometimes you know, I would probably say 5% of what I do is a dictatorship, and the rest of it is our executive team, right? Or it might be our line team, whoever the problem is associated with, and then we bring it up through the ranks. So fix your thinking as to, and I try to predetermine what I'm going to ask for feedback on and what I'm not. What are my non-negotiables? You know, I always say when somebody says something and it's like, well, you know, first of all, do you believe that that's true? That's always a very good question to go back to your staffing with, is do you believe that that's a true problem? A lot of times we hear things from the field and I'm getting it secondhand, so I'm not just going to take, you know, if I hear something from a mechanic and it's about the line team, I go directly to the line team and I say, this is what I've heard. Do you think that there's any substance to this? So actually question and do some deep digging. Don't just go because, you know, you're thinking, yeah, that could probably be true, but you need to go back and you need to find out whether things are true or not. So fixing your thinking and predetermining that you're always going to get to the root cause is very important, and not just listening to some other people. Learn to reframe your problem. So, you know, I would probably say most of us that are married, we kind of, we're probably pretty good at this. I know when Matt and I are disagreeing on something, I know how to reframe that to, you know, to kind of get him to talk about it with me instead of him trying to fix it. A lot of times, especially being a woman business owner, he wants to know what's happening in the company, and then I'll tell him, or if I go to him and I'm just saying this happened today, and then now he comes to me and he's saying, do I just need to give you sympathy or do you need solution? And he kind of asked me, am I looking for a solution or am I just needing a listening ear? Right? So think about that. Is it that you're just needing a sympathetic ear, or are you asking for solutions? Okay? That's very helpful. And you are the CPS, the chief problem solver. This is in your personal life, and this is working around the folks that you're interacting with every day. You know, they say that every single person makes about 36,000 decisions a day for those of us that work. Okay, I think unemployed, I think it was 14, about either 13.5 or 14,000 decisions. So even like retired people, people on unemployment, they're still almost at the 15,000 mark. Those of us that are interacting with people at work every day, we're averaging 34 to 36,000 decisions per day. That is a lot of decisions, right? And that's it goes from what are we going to eat, what are we going to wear, you know, somebody says something, you make a comment, you know, so depending on who you're talking to each and every day, that's a lot of decisions that we're actually acting on, reacting to. So you're solving problems every single day of your life, so make sure that you have already got some baseline with decisions. You know, in our company, we have 3 baseline decisions. You know, is it going to impede on someone else? Is it safe? And what is it going to cost? And cost should always be last. And I just want to point that out because, you know, when we first got started, I'll never forget, I was like, oh my gosh, I need these helmets, you know, for them to talk. And like each one of those are $1,500. But that has a bearing on safety, right? So we have to purchase those, right? So money is always last, and I know that in the utility world, we all have budgets, and when we say yes to something, we're actually saying no to something else, right? Because when we do say yes, that impacts our no's. So anyone can point out a problem, and basically the value that you bring is a reflection of the problems that you solve. So what are you doing to solve problems within your home and your company? Both of those have a very big impact on those people that are looking to you for leadership. Better choices, better life. I always say, I love this picture of Matt and I. It was our first picture we ever had done. We were both very young at that time. But I just remember that, you know, better choices make a better life. And especially, you know, I was a single mom for all those years. And I knew I didn't want to grow old by myself, but I was gun shy about a second go around. And so the question is, what if becoming the person you want to be starts before you make a decision? And so when we're thinking about what are the desires of our hearts, what is it that I want in life, how do I want to conduct myself, and then, you know, also those of us as we're getting older, what legacy do I want to leave? That's been one that I've just recently added on. So making the good decisions, what gets in our way? We make about 35,000 decisions each day. Scientists right now say that we're decision fatigued. So when we're dead scrolling and you're saying yes or no to your scrolling, I don't even think that 35,000 decisions that we make even includes that right there, that yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, right? So our decision muscle gets tired. We are all tired. And then indecision is the enemy of progress. Indecision technically is no decision, which no is an answer. You know, like when you look at your family's finances, and, you know, my sister-in-law, totally addicted to Amazon. But yet, when we were talking about going on a family vacation, she says, oh, we can't afford that. And I said, well, if you quit Amazon, you could afford it, right? But that kind of got me in hot water, especially with my mother. But it was the truth, right? So just emotions overindulge logic. And so one of the things that we do is we overanalyze things that do not matter and then not things that really do. So when you're looking at your family budget and you're going out and you're spending money where you probably don't need to be spending money, or you're spending time where you actually don't need to be spending time, because those are the two most important things that are that predicts our joy in life, is where we spend our money and where we spend our time. If you want to see what takes up somebody's real estate in their head, look at where they spend their money and where they spend their time. And that will give a very good indication of what and how they think. So decide before what you will do later. The power of predecision, right? That's what we're talking about. What do you value? Where do you spend your time and where do you spend your money? Those are the things that we value. You will honor yourself before the moment. Guys, this is so important, because basically when we're pre-decisioning, we are saying that this is where I stand, this is who I am, this is the baseline of my character, this is the baseline of my integrity. How am I going to make pre-decisions so that I already know what I'm going to do? One of the things that I did early in my career is, you know, I was working a non-traditional career for a female, and I always decided, you know, hey, there's no reason for me to be bellied up to a bar with a bunch of men, and I can still be embrace my femininity. Hopefully there's some women listening to this. Embrace my femininity, but let the guys have their guys. I'll see them at breakfast the next morning. And, you know, that was a decision that has served me well through the years. Another decision, I'm going to get up, I'm going to spend time. I choose to spend time in my Bible. It may be meditation, it may be going for a run, it may be just quiet time where you're reading your favorite book or doing something that you enjoy. Block off that time for yourself. All of these are going to feed into you becoming the person that you want to be. Self-awareness. How many times have you been involved where someone is they are totally unaware of how they are being perceived in a social setting? Whether you're at a conference, whether you're at a tailboard meeting, you've all seen that inappropriateness of someone not being self-aware. So being self-aware is you need to do these things. You need to reflect regularly. And again, use that morning time. You know, yesterday I had this one instance, and this morning, you know, I really had to think about that. And I was like, I didn't handle that so well. Next time I'm going to do this differently. And then I say that to myself, how I'm going to handle something differently. Seek feedback. A lot of times we do not like feedback, and especially as a leader, because it is hurtful, especially when we give 110%. We're working long hours, long days. You're thinking about it when you go to bed. You're thinking about it when you wake up. You're thinking about it when you're at the grocery store. And then you get that feedback that says blah, 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 and you take it so personally. And it's hard not to, and I get that. However, you've got to be able to rise above the occasion, and you've got to be able to accept that feedback. Assess your strengths and weaknesses, and a lot of times that feedback is what helps us do that. So don't be afraid to get that. Every year at training, we ask for feedback, and some of it's great and some of it's not. But you've got to have it, because you can't improve as a leader if you don't have that feedback. Next, understand your motivation. What is your why, right? What makes you show back up every single day? And then last, monitor your emotions. Now, this is very hard to do sometimes, especially because we are giving and we're pouring in, or we at least think we are, right? And then something happens and then we totally overreact. I've been there, and I've had to go back and say, look, I totally overreacted on that, and I'm so sorry. I thought about what you said. I think you're right. Or you don't even have to say I think you're right, if not all of it was right. But you've got to be able to regulate your emotions. And I think just not taking things personally. And unfortunately, that comes with time. You're not going to be able to come out of the gate with that, especially in new positions. And it's like a workout. You've got to work that muscle. So just regulate your emotions, and then also self-awareness is a crucial element in personal growth and decision making. It involves having a clear understanding of oneself, technically. And last but not least, you in 5 years. So today, my question is, you know how everybody says, oh, just 21 days to master a habit. Forget 21 days. 21 days actually is just a gentle reset for you to become the person that you want to be, right? And if it's just 21 days, we don't see that as long term. 21 days is very short in our brains now. 21 days 7 years ago was a lot longer in the way that people actually saw life. So 21 days is just a gentle reset. So instead, I encourage you to stop thinking in that 21 to 30 day reset. I want you to think about you in 5 years. And go ahead and write down all those things. This is where I want to be in 5 years. Because if you don't have that path, in 21 days, you're definitely not going to have that path. So where do you want to be in 5 years? I ask you, your spiritual life, what's lacking? What are you doing to feed your soul? How do you feed your soul on a daily basis? What do you need to improve on? Your relationships. You know, I always say that your relationships are really a reflection of what and who you are. You know, if you want to really see a good marriage, most likely there's 2 good spouses there, right? A friendship, you know, you can't have a friendship if both are not giving. I meant to say this earlier. We were talking about you know, resets and not being afraid to recalibrate. I went through a season where actually there was some friends that were not. It wasn't fruitful anymore, right? I had several girlfriends that, you know, now they're just acquaintances, and that's okay. You're not going to always keep the same people day in and day out through the entirety of your life. So don't be afraid to cut back on relationships, step up. Maybe you're working with someone right now and you just really think, you know, wow, they've really got character, they've got integrity, and I'd like to be more like that. Spend time with that person over the other person. So you can make that decision. Financially, financial awareness is probably one of the best things that gives us peace of mind. And I encourage you that if you do not have your finances under control, that you seek help in doing that. You can do it on your own. I know before my daughter, Forrest, my son-in-law that loves to hunt, he came to me and he was like, you know, I'd like to marry Katie. And I said, that's fine, but before you marry Katie, you have to do a Dave Ramsey a financial course, and you have to do premarital counseling for 6 months. And so sure enough, they did that, and they got married. And Katie and Forrest had their house paid off for in 2.5 years. So, you know, you can do that on your own, but take stock of that. Figure out, I'm wasting money here. I was single for a long time, and I was not someone that really enjoyed cooking. My daughter always says my mom made pasta. That was all she could boil pasta. And but one of the things that I started doing is I actually started looking about, it was several months ago, and I was thinking I can tighten up my financials. I wanted to start giving to this other organization, but I didn't want to stop doing this other thing that I was doing. And so I thought, what can I cut out? And I thought, me eating out. You know, my husband flies jets all over the world, and so I was like, every time he's not here, and he's gone for like 14, 17 days at a time, I would go to this little restaurant, Elliot's, and every time I was eating there, it was $30 a night to get my to-go box of meat and other stuff. So I thought I could cut that out. Well, I figured out that I was spending like $400 or $500 a month in eating out. So I thought, oh my goodness, that is huge. Well, sure enough, my girlfriend had been talking about this wonderful thing called an air fryer. And so I went and bought an air fryer, and I started to learn to, you know, it's really easy. You just throw it in there and shut it, and then hit the fry button. And so I started thinking that would be great. I can give this money and reallocate that to give to this other charity. So financially, where can you cut back? You know, subscriptions. The other day, I was looking at TV subscriptions, you know, between Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, I had Paramount, I had HBO Max. And I was like, this is crazy. I don't even watch but one. Friendly TV for Hallmark people. So what can you do financially to actually put yourself in a better position? Take a look at that. And I've got some great apps. You're always welcome to contact me. You know, I've done so much better in that arena. And then last but not least, physically. Your health is very indicative on spiritual, relation, and financial. If your health goes south, none of that other matters. So what are you doing for your health? What are you doing to take care of you? I really encourage you to take a look at that. You know, in today, we're moving fast-paced. The other day, I took my grandkids up to this pumpkin patch thing, and we stopped at a racetrack. They wanted everything in there that came in a package, right? And there was 2 little baskets that had a banana at the top and then a couple of apples that I was like, no, those are old, let's not eat those. So we ended up getting a banana. You look at that, and that is so indicative of our world right now. Everything is fast, it's packaged, and most of the time it's bad for us. So think ahead, prepare, decide. You know, one of the things that we decide on now is, you know, we don't eat fast foods. We don't even eat chain food anymore. The other day, we could not find a restaurant. We ended up eating at Texas Roadhouse. But eat as clean and as healthy and as you can, you know. And but you've got to be able to, you know, participate in this world financially, spiritually, with the relationships. Your health has got to be in good working order. So what do you need to do to make that better? So you in 5 years, where are you going to be in 5 years? Not 30 days, 5 years. What does that look like? Continuous learning. Start where you are. Use what you have. Do what you can. Today is your opportunity to build the tomorrow that you want. That's you in 5 years. So continuous learning. Here's just some of the things. By you being here today, investing, and today is more about your resiliency, your sustainability. What are you going to do as a leader? What are you going to do to lead yourself? And what are you going to do to actually contribute and then make others follow you? And at last but not least, the greatness code. Is greatness defined by ability, wealth, or status? No. Greatness, really, what can you do for others? What is it that you can do for others to feed others? But first, you've got to feed yourself, so take care of yourself. The you first rule. In your teams at work, every person has a role and every person matters. And I love the next one, serve anyway. Even people that do not appreciate your service, you serve them anyway. Confidence and professionalism is not enough anymore. Actually, I even think that professionalism can get in the way of us doing what we really need to do for an employee. Sometimes that employee, you might be the only and the closest person that they've got right then and there. We never know what's going on behind closed doors. So I always say serve anyway. No matter if you think that person cannot stand you, you serve anyway. When you think that you're not appreciated, you serve anyway. No matter what, you serve anyway. And I think that's probably my favorite out of this. And greatness is about servicing. Servicing those around us, whether it's serving, like I call my mom every day. You know, she's 80 and that's my way of checking in on her, letting her know she matters. Every morning I ask my husband, what can I do for you today? I check in with my daughter every day. I check in with one employee over the weekend every single week. Serve anyway. Just to have an offline conversation. With some employees, I'm alone with them more than I am others, and so I know what's going on. But those employees that I'm not alone with or that I don't have the opportunity, hey, I'm just calling, oh, what do you need? Nothing, I just thought about you today and I was just going to see how things are going. That is serving anyway. So you are more than enough. I think, when you really take a look at what's inhibiting you, if somebody would have told my 30-year-old self that I would be running helicopters on transmission lines, I would have been like, you are crazy. If somebody would have said, oh, you're actually going to own a company, I would say, I'm not built for that. You're more than enough. And sometimes when we don't follow those callings, you lose out on the greatest opportunities. So today, if you want that job and you feel like you're not enough, you are enough. If you want to move up, you go ask. Only you are going to take care of you like you need to be taken care of. I want you to have enough strength and courage and confidence in yourself that you can do hard things. And the very first thing that we're going to start with is starting with leading yourself, predetermining what you want in 5 years and how you want your life to look. It is totally up to you. And that is all I have for today. So thank you guys for attending. And Brent's got my contact information. You are always more than welcome to reach out to me and directly. And if you've got any questions, I will be more than happy to answer. Thank you so much.